Hey Fatheads, welcome to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings, episode 5, where we talk about beer. I'm your host, Cigar Surgeon John Reiner. I'm here with my current co-host and semi-permanent co-host, Rob your ass.
Semi-permanent, huh? I got promoted?
Well, I think we're just going to suck you in. I figure if I get you drunk over enough episodes, you just, if you just keep wanting to come back, it'll be some kind of codependency thing, or who knows.
Does this mean I get to write off all my beer purchases?
Well, I have to talk to the MFN CEO about that. He handles all the tax breaks.
That's a good point.
As you guys can see, we're also here with our special guest, Kevin Freer from Wellington Brewery in Guelph, Ontario. Kevin, you'll say hello to our audience.
Cheers. Hello. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for joining us, man.
So, for those who aren't aware, because I know a lot of people like to take digs at Canadian beer, but we actually take our beer pretty seriously up here, and Kevin, I'm sure, will wax poetic about it. But Wellington actually is is the oldest indie brewery in Canada. So that should give people out there an indication of just how seriously we take our beer.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we've been around since 1985.
Wow, that's it's not longer than me or longer than John, but it's probably longer than some of the mods that we've got on Cigar Federation. So that's 1985. Yeah. It doesn't feel that long ago, though, does it? Well, maybe, I don't know. For you, like, you were around in 1985, maybe.
No, it's older than me.
Oh man, the beard had me thinking. Wow, where do you get all these youngsters from, John?
I don't know, man. It's because they think I'm young, so they're like, he's one of those cool young hip guys. Maybe we'll show up on a show, but
you're accepted just because everybody thinks you're young.
Yeah, baby face. So tonight, for all the audience out there, I am pairing a Nica Rustica. For me, the Nica Rustica is a nice medium-bodied cigar. Has some nuts to it, a little bit of molasses. I kind of went through the humidor. I was trying to find the right cigar. I don't think there is a right cigar per se, but to me, this immediately stood out as just an excellent go-to for medium pairing. I'm pairing with 3 beers tonight, so as we go, I'm sure I'll be a lot more red-faced and fun. Start out with something from Robbie's home state, a Maximus India Pale Ale. This comes from the Sonoma County in California. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I'm assuming it's Lagunitas Brewing Company.
Lagunitas or Lagunitas? I've heard it both ways.
As you can see, it's sort of a nice golden color. Smells really good, tastes really good. I've been kind of sneaking drinks here and there. Spoiler alert. Also, on Kevin's recommendation, I've got the Green Flash Brewing Company's Double Black Ale Stout. They advertise it as big, bold, and complex. I cheated last night and had one, and I have to agree it is big, bold, and complex. Very malty. I'm a big fan. And last but not least, because I'm not afraid to take one for the team, and I have a double IPA, which would not be my pick for pairing with, certainly not with this cigar, and I'd really have to think about what cigar I'd want to pair it with. This is a double IPA from Bad Hair, Rhinelander Brewing Company out of Wisconsin. So we're kind of all over the map. I've had this before. This is a full-bodied IPA. This is the Triple Ligero for me of IPAs. Big fan.
That looked like a gigantic bottle.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beer. So when Canadian says I'm going to have 6 beers, this is what they're talking about. They're not talking about any Nancy Coors, Miller Lite, or any 350 ml cans.
It's funny. It's funny actually that you say that. I didn't necessarily get the memo for the show, and this is what I brought.
So, Coors Light.
So I'm feeling a little bit out of my depth here. Although the mountains are blue, which I think means that it's ready to be paired with. But anyway, no, that was just a bad joke. I went with some of Kevin's recommendations as well. One of the ones that I was able to find is Monk's Blood from 21st Amendment. I was able to find that because they are based out of San Francisco, so I would hope that I would be able to find it. And this is a Belgian style. I'm reading directly off the can because I know how to drink beer, but I don't know a whole lot about it. Belgian style dark ale brewed with cinnamon, vanilla, oak chips, and dried figs. Sounds fantastic. And I was on the hunt for stouts. I wanted an oatmeal stout and a chocolate stout. Kevin gave me some recommendations. There was one recommendation that you gave me, man, the Firestone one. And when I asked the guy at the liquor store, and this is kind of a liquor store that does it right. I mean, they've got hundreds of beers, and he kind of chuckled when I asked him if they had that. He's like, "Yeah, dude, you're never gonna find it." Apparently, that one's a tough one to find. Is why I didn't really know. So for an oatmeal stout, I went with the McKellar Beer Geek breakfast beer, which I always like a good breakfast beer, especially when I'm camping.
Hey, who doesn't?
The shower beer is good too, right?
Absolutely, man.
As long as you keep it out of the soap. This one, it's an oatmeal stout brewed with coffee. So that, just being a cigar guy, that kind of jumped out at me because cigars and coffee, that's a good comparison, or a good pairing. And this one, and believe it or not, John gets all the stuff from California, and I go out and buy a Canadian beer. I had no idea this was a Canadian beer. There's something above that, which I think is in French, but I'm just going to go with the words that I know, which is Aphrodite. It's a chocolate stout. It's brewed with real cocoa and vanilla bean.
Just for all our French listeners out there, I'm pretty sure that's going to be Aphrodite there, Rob.
Is it?
Yeah.
Aphrodite.
Aphrodite. Yeah.
Aphrodite. Well, shouldn't that have a Y?
There's French people out there right now rolling their eyes.
Well, here, you know what? I'm going to say, before the show even started, I pointed it out to you guys, and I said, it's Aphrodite, and no one corrected me. Thanks.
You're welcome.
That
I'm not
sound you
afraid to
hear.
throw my co-host under the bus.
That sound you hear is the good old American getting thrown under the bus. But anyway, so those are the three that I brought to the table. I'm pairing with an Arroyo CBT Maduro, which, if you guys follow the site, I just reviewed a month ago. Gave it a 93, which is one of the highest scores I think I've ever given. I love this cigar. It's a triple Maduro. With the beer selection that I have here, I figured that the pairing would be pretty good. Okay, so what did you bring to the store or to the show, Kevin? The store.
So cigar-wise, we'll start with that. I have the Four Kicks Crown Head Selection number 5, I believe is what they call it or whatever. Yeah, big fan of everything they've done so far. Headley Grange and this being two of my kind of go-tos. As far as beers go, we said stouts. We said something sweet. So I have the Young's Double Chocolate Stout.
Almost got that one.
It's delightful. It's a good go-to. It's sweet. It's very chocolatey. It's very full-bodied. I got Chimay Blue, which
fantastic.
is a Belgian beer, Abbey beer, brewed by monks. One of my all-time favorites. And then the other two, which I don't have the bottles available, something hoppy, which is something local, is Junction Conductor's Craft Ale from Toronto, and then a Saison for something a little lighter that I made specifically just to have on tap at my house.
Wow.
The benefits of working in a brewery.
Yeah.
So what's funny about that Chimay Blue, Kevin, is that just last week we were talking about a pairing. We had one of our Instagram followers, Chuck Clack, was doing a AJ Fernandez San Latano Maduro with the Chimay Red, and I was commenting how, in my mind, it was kind of two ends of the spectrum. You got the Chimay Red, which is so bright, very, very strong with the brightness. Sure. It's not subtle at all. And you've got that San Latano Maduro at the other end, which is, very, very heavy. So how does it for you? How does the blue compare to the red? Like, I don't have a lot of experience with the blue.
Well, yeah. Now we're kind of getting into the meat of the beer and cigar pairing. Is this complement or contrast kind of mindset towards things? Both Chimays are highly carbonated. They're kind of bright. They're kind of effervescent, but they have this like deep fruit flavor to them. This deep,
very deep.
Kind of figs, kind of raisiny. The red has like it's a little more dry versus the blue, which is like their Grand Reserve, which is a little more intense, a little bigger mouthfeel, a little higher alcohol, and has a very good chance of overwhelming a cigar. Actually, if you were to smoke a cigar and like a lighter bodied cigar and drink that, there's a very good chance you would lose one or the other.
And it kind of got ahead of ourselves there because I'm already talking Pairings, and one of the things we wanted to ask about is maybe you could talk a little bit about the brewery and what you do there, and the beer experience, because we've talked in detail. I've educated myself so far on rum and bourbon, and we've kind of talked a little bit about the history. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the beer process and the beer experience.
Sure. Yeah. Gonna do the Cliff Notes version. Beer is malted barley mixed with hot water. That's called the mash, and that converts the starch in the barley to fermentable sugars. You run that off, you boil it. That's where you add your hops and your malt, or sorry, your hops and any sort of like spices or adjuncts or whatever you're gonna do. Hops impart bitterness, or they impart flavor depending on where you put them in the boil. Later in the boil, you're going to get a lot more flavor and a lot more aroma out of them. So your IPAs are going to be more heavily hopped towards the back end of the boil. From that point, you cool it out, you ferment it. Yeast is going to play a huge part in it, imparting certain flavors. That's a kind of complicated relationship. And from there, it's just let it ferment, cool it, package it, filter it, whatever you got to do to get it into a bottle, and ship it out to you fine folks.
Well, maybe you can comment on this, because I've heard this at a beer tasting. I wasn't sure how much truth there was, and that was originally the whole purpose of hops being added to beer was an actual preservative. That is, they wanted to keep the beer from going, I don't know, what does beer go, sour, flat?
Go sour, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Hops are a big preservative to certain bacteria that will probably cause a beer to go sour, which is not really it's not really desirable for most flavors. I mean, back then they didn't know that. Obviously, they didn't know what bacteria was, but they just found if we add this over time, we make better beer than our competitors or whatever.
Interesting.
Go
ahead.
Well, there was actually prior to that there was what they called gruit, or what we call gruit now, which is beer made without hops. So usually it's something like bog myrtle, heather, yarrow, things like that, which would spice a beer and add that bitterness to kind of balance out the sweetness of the malt.
And what kind of what kind of lineup of beers? Because I was on your website doing some research, because as Rob has known from hanging out with me for a week in Las Vegas, I tend to like to go crazy, a little obsessive about research. So I was on the website, I was looking at your beers, and it looks like you sort of have a regular lineup of beers, and then you also have sort of one-time craftings or seasonal beers.
Sure, yeah. We have we're primarily an English style brewery. We do a lot of English style ales, like your bitters, your an IPA here and there, a dark ale, a stout. But we do like to have fun. We do a series of beers called one-offs, which is a lot of what I do, is just coming up with new ideas, seasonal ideas, get into a new ingredient, see what I can do with it, run a small batch, and then scale it up to a bigger batch.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, beyond the fact of drinking, I'm sure that, everybody who doesn't like drinking, but how much, I guess, bad beers do you produce versus good beers? There's got to be a sort of an experiment there where you're turning out stuff that isn't necessarily the best.
I don't like to use the word bad. I like to use less good.
Less good. All right.
But that's why we have a pilot system, and that's why when it gets very experimental, we try it first instead of we'll make 40 liters instead of making 6,000 liters on the first shot, right? 40 liters is easy to sell. 6,000 liters is much more difficult to sell.
Interesting. Well, we're going to get back to that in a second, because I have a lot of questions around that. But we're going to take a quick break here, quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. So this segment is brought to you by Wellington Brewery out of Guelph, Ontario. Appreciate them being on the show. I appreciate Kevin being on the show and taking time to speak to us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So we were just talking about you get to do a lot of the one-off beers. So can you talk a little bit about the process? Because I've never had the enjoyment or the opportunity to try something like that. And that sounds like a blast.
Well, a bit of that goes into my background as a home brewer. I started off making beer at home. My wife bought me a kit to make beer, and I made it, and I was like, wow, this is technically beer, but it's not very good. And from there, and from there, I learned more about the ingredients, and then got my first job as a pro, and moved through the ranks like kind of like a chef would. And you, at a certain point, you begin to learn your ingredients. So when they say we want to make, a raspberry saison with, lemongrass in it, you start to understand what volumes you need of the individual ingredients, what'll be overpowering, what'll be too much, what'll be not enough, and how to add it. So yeah, it's a bit of intuition and it's a bit of experience.
Now, just hearing you describe that, it reminds me, and I know John will probably, this will resonate with him as well, there's a lot of corollaries there with the cigar industry. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
A lot of small batch stuff, the people are trying out. Some guys will do, like you said, pilots or whatever, they call it whatever they want to call it, and then decide later that, it was good, it was successful, and let's do a longer run. I know when I went down to Nicaragua, I was invited by the Drew Estate folks, and I got to play around with some tobacco and brew and blend a cigar, spinning in my head.
It's starting already.
Yeah, exactly. And I've only had 2 sips to blend a cigar. And like you said, it was a cigar, but I mean, once you get to learn, the Ligeros and the different primings and how much Viso and Seco you want to get in there, and if you want specific flavors, you're looking for tobaccos from this region. There's just a lot of corollaries there, and you brought that back to being a chef. That's something that we have a lot of our guests when we have another show called Cigar Chat, and a lot of the guests will talk about they describe it in the same way that a chef would, grabbing, I'll take this spice and this spice and this spice, and I'm going to make whatever. I mean, I can't look into my pantry and do that, but people can, and it sounds like you can look at your different ingredients and just, like you said, if you need a particular flavor or for particular style of brew, you know how to do it because you have that experience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at a certain point, like, we are tasting all of our raw ingredients. We are sitting there eating, handfuls of malt, tasting them. We just got a bunch of cocoa husks in. I've never seen those before. I didn't know what they were. We're tasting them. We're making teas out of them. We're seeing what's going on. But it's interesting that you bring up the cigar world and the beer world, because a lot of what drew me into the cigar world is how similar it is to the beer world. There's a lot of people very passionate about their blends and their raw ingredients and making something by hand that's the best, and appeals to them as a person. Their blend might not appeal to everybody, but to them it's it's what they want to make, and they're very passionate about it.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, John, I didn't mean to jump in there, but go ahead.
No, please. And I mean, this discussion really resonates with me because, my background really is cooking. I mean, I've been cooking for most of my life. And Kevin, you were talking about tasting raw ingredients, and it's funny to me because I've had a number of people, they're like, well, you said you tasted leather. How do you know what leather tastes like? And I said, you never put it. Yeah. Because I've tasted leather. Like, well, how do you know what this tastes like? How do you know what mint tastes like? How do you know what this plant tastes like? It's because I've put it in my mouth and I've tasted it and I've spit it out. Like, that's kind of part of the unfortunate process of sort of linking those flavors to your brain and really understanding the combinations there. And I don't know how otherwise you do it. I mean, you can smell it, but unless you taste it, you're missing out on a huge part of the experience.
So, how do you guys want to do this? We've each got a few different beers. Do we want to talk about the beers individually or talk about them how they're pairing? Because Kevin, you actually made an interesting statement earlier when you were talking about pairing. I don't remember exactly what you said, but I'll paraphrase. That whether the flavors either meld together and complement each other, or they kind of push away from each other, almost like two magnets that I don't know what the difference is with magnets that causes them to push away, but like that. And in this first pairing that I tried with the Aroa, and I gotta figure out how to say his last name because I don't think I'm saying it right. Aroa, the CBT, and the Monk's Blood, which is the dark ale brewed with cinnamon, vanilla, oak, and dried figs. I didn't feel like they were complementing each other well, really at all. but it didn't seem like they were combating either. It was like I tasted the cigar and then I tasted the beer. It was a very different type of pairing, and it was also you'd also said something about them being. This one was a little more carbonated. It seemed like more effervescent than the others. So that really feels like it kind of gives a real delineation between flavors for me. Like it almost kind of cleans the palate and then gives you the beer flavor.
Right. So it's interesting that you bring up cleans the palate. What I was talking about was complement or contrast, right?
Yeah.
Which can be good or bad, right? You can have a cigar that's very earthy and very chocolatey, and have this IPA that's super grassy and super citrusy, and they contrast, but they work well together. And then you can have ones that complement, that are like a chocolatey kind of thing, going with your nice like Maduro and strong Ligero kind of cigar, that also complement each other and build each other up. But where that can break down is where one overwhelms the other.
Yeah.
But bringing up something being effervescent, I like that in a light beer like this saison that I made right here. It's got a strong rye base. It's very spicy. It's highly carbonated. It kind of clears the palate in between puffs on the cigar, where the bubbles kind of bring the cigar taste off your tongue, so you're ready for the next puff on it, and you can taste everything a little better.
Yeah, that was like verbatim what I was experiencing with the Monk's Blood. I mean, it's a darker beer. I mean, as you can see, it's not as dark as some of the others. It's got kind of a reddish hue to it. But yeah, the flavors are both on the heavier side, but that effervescence in the beer really did separate them. I mean, it was almost like a barrier between the two, which was kind of interesting. I've never experienced that before. I don't pair a whole lot with beer. I'm usually pairing with rum, bourbon. I never really do any Scotch pairings either. But anyway, that was just a point I wanted to bring up. But we'll go to John.
What's interesting for me is I kind of, and I shouldn't have done this, but I sort of had this preset mindset of how this is going to pair, or at least how I thought it was going to pair, and it's part of the fun experience is trying out stuff and seeing how wrong you are, at least for me. I assumed that the India Pale Ale would go great, the Stout would sort of be the perfect pairing, and the IPA would completely blow out the cigar. But what I've actually found is that the Pale Ale is almost taken on a little bit of a bitterness with this cigar. It's still interesting, it's still good, and they are very contrasting flavors. Curiously, the Stout and the Nica Rustica almost cancel each other out. It's almost like a white noise to the Stout. So I'm still getting some malt from the at least what I think is the beer, but it's almost indistinguishable. There, I'm already losing my tongue from the beer. And the biggest surprise to me is that the IPA, which I figured would completely overpower the cigar, is one of the most interesting of the three, because now, and I've had this IPA quite a few times, I'm actually getting some orange peel, a lot of really brightness off this IPA. So it's almost like this particular cigar is cutting off sort of that really high-end bitter hoppy end to this IPA and revealing a lot of the almost floral and citrusy notes, which is quite surprising to me, actually.
Yeah, I've moved on to the oatmeal stout with the coffee, and I'm going to save some of this for later because I want to taste it on a fresh palate, and I don't have a fresh palate right now. But it is really interesting the way that coffee bitterness really jumps out, and I don't know if that's a product of the sweetness of this cigar, but this would be. It's a pairing that I like, but I almost feel like the flavors are really butting heads, like you had mentioned. It's really bringing out the bitterness in the beer, and I don't know that that's really a positive thing, but I kind of like it. So I'll go with it, I guess. I don't know if it's a good pairing, but I'm enjoying it. If that makes any sense.
Sure, I find the same thing as what you're saying, is that cigars tend to bring out the bitterness in a beer, which is why I don't particularly like hoppy beers when I'm smoking a cigar. There's the odd one that works just beautifully, but to me, a very hoppy beer, and not even necessarily hoppy, but a very bitter beer, kind of dulls both the cigar and the beer.
Yeah.
but then you get the odd one that's not, like the other day I had Le Trois Musketeers Baltic Porter, which is a very, very sweet beer, very high alcohol, 10% alcohol, and just completely overwhelmed the cigar I was smoking. I wish I could remember the name. It was a Nomad something or other, 36 something. Whatever.
S307.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. That's the one.
I'm surprised because that S307 is a heater.
It's a pretty strong cigar. Yeah, we did a bourbon pairing at IPCPR, and that was a cigar that we all paired with.
That would be excellent, right? The sweetness from the bourbon mixing with that like earthiness and that sweetness from that cigar.
I thought it was great. And the funniest part of the whole thing, there were some presenters. Fred, Fred Ruiz, the owner of Nomad Cigar, he was there, and it was a Buffalo Trace bourbon. And John, you may remember what it was called, but I don't. And the main sponsor was Cigars and Spirits magazine, and the editor-in-chief of Cigar and Spirits magazine talked about how he wouldn't have made this pairing of the strong cigar with the sweet bourbon. He felt like they wouldn't pair well, and I thought the pairing was fantastic. So either I have just a horrible palate and don't know what I'm talking about, which I kind of believe, or he was a little bit, I don't know, if he felt like he was a little bit off base when he made that comment.
Yeah, I was on the same page with you, Robin. I actually, I brought it up with Fred after. I said, I drink a lot, obviously. I smoke a lot, and I like to pair a lot. Obviously, we've got a show about it. And I thought the pairing was fantastic. Like, in my mind,
I liked it a lot.
I was, in fact, the thing I was most upset about was we didn't have a chance to really explore that pairing because we were limited on time. But for me, it was almost, and I think the exact words I said to Fred was, that was a very yin-yang pairing. That is, they complemented each other almost perfectly, and so the heavy body of the S307 was offset by the sweetness of the bourbon. Neither one overpowered each other, and I was quite shocked by his comments. I mean, the thing is, and we've talked about this over and over with liquor and cigars, is that taste is subjective, and the editor might not have liked that pairing. I disagree. I actually disagree very strongly. I thought the S307 and that bourbon was an amazing pairing, and we're going to revisit it, I'm sure, on a future show. But I mean, that's part of the experience: is try out stuff you like, try out stuff you don't like. Today I've already been surprised by my preconceived notions of I thought this IPA was going to be terrible with this cigar, and I'm completely wrong. It's actually one of the best pairings of these three, I think, so far.
Well, that's one of the great things about pairings and about cigars and about craft beer in general is that it's completely subjective. I mean, some people can love a beer. I can absolutely hate it. Some people can love a cigar. I can hate it. It's totally subjective. Now, there is a bar level of quality, but I think once you hit that level of quality, I hate IPAs with cigars, and that's just my personal taste. But I'm waiting to be blown away by it. You just got to be open to these kind of pairings and see what happens.
Have you done any Ron Mexico pairings yet with any of the beers, the Wellington beers?
I have. Oh God, let's not revisit the Ron Mexico. But I have smoked one of those. Yeah.
For the audience who aren't aware of it's a bit of an inside joke because, with no disrespect to Ron Mexico, it's this. How do I politically say this?
Cigar.
It's a budget cigar that sort of took on a cult following with Reddit R Cigars, and it sort of became an inside joke of sending people tons of these to smoke or pair or enjoy. I actually have one that's sitting for review, and I'm sort of hesitant to try it. I have to smoke it because it was gifted to me. But that'll probably be something for a different show.
There's been a recommendation in the chat room from our good friend Jared Garrott that you pair it with some Natty Light.
Let's just not do that.
It's just not. Okay, so I know we're probably close to another break here, John.
You got it.
Well, we've got some audience questions and things that I've got a few that people have sent me that I really want to talk about this last pairing, but we can do it on the other side of the break. Oh.
This break brought to you by Cigar Federation Store. Cigar Federation Store. Sign up for the Cigar of the Month Club. Get a great choice of boutique cigars every month. Rotates out. Check it out.
You do that like a master.
Do I?
It's just so like professional and Canadian and awesome.
You know what that is? That's part of being a Weasley sales guy for like the last 20 years. Is like and this is completely off topic, but it's like I feel like I could show up at any event and be like, hey, do you want to sell this product? And I'd say, sure, let's sell this product. And they'd say, do you know anything about this product? Whatever. We'll just go with it. It'll be fun.
So you're telling me that if you were one of those guys at IPCPR with those little like weird massager things that connected to like your iPad or whatever, you could have sold those?
You know what? You don't want a 20-minute rant. We don't have enough time for a 20-minute rant on
moving on
healing and magnets. So we'll just move on from that, and maybe we can ask Kevin some of the audience questions.
Yeah, let's do that. I've got a couple here. One from Isaac McLaughlin asked a question. He says, "I'm new to craft beer, but with that said, are there any room temperature type beers out there that you guys could recommend?" He likes his beer a little bit on the warmer side. So Kevin, that's coming right at you, man.
Yeah, on that topic, English style ales are generally like cask ales. So you're looking at your bitters, even some IPAs, not American IPAs, but English IPAs, stouts, porters. Those are all English style ales that would traditionally be served at cask temperature, which would be a slightly lower than room temperature, but room temperature will give you a good approximation of that flavor.
Yeah, I mean, beyond that, I mean, John, I don't know if you have any. I've had a few beers that I remember them on the bottle saying, serve them at room temperature for optimal enjoyment or whatever. Off the top of my head, I can't think of what they were. They were all bigger, darker beers. I could tell you that.
Sure. I actually got a bit of a beer education, if that's what you call it,
nice.
When I went through Scotland, because I'm a whiskey whore, and they really introduced me to bitters because Scotland, of course, imports tons of bitters from England, and one of the bitters I really got hooked on was Smithwick's. I think it's.
Oh, yeah, Smithwick's.
Yeah, I don't know how it's actually pronounced.
That's how they said it when we were in Ireland. That stuff is good, man.
It's good, and it's room temperature, and it's funny because, I'll sit here and preach about how whiskey needs to be served at room temperature, but then I'll go and chill my beer glass. So they served it at room temperature, and I was like, okay, I don't know if this is really going to be the thing for me. But you know what? It's fantastic. It's complex. It's interesting. It's different. And I think, like whiskey, there's probably a ton of flavor complexity that you're not going to pick up if you chill it, because chilling it on Kevin, I'm sure, can talk to a lot more detail on this, but chilling completely changes the way your tongue tastes flavors. It changes the flavors that are present. They say that's a beer that's meant to be served at room temperature, and I enjoyed it at room temperature.
Sure, just like Rob's can of Coors Light that he was showing us earlier. The mountains don't denote that it's cold.
It's not blue anymore.
The mountains denote that it's cold enough that you're not really going to taste it, and that is a beer. I'm not giving them crap. That is a beer that is designed to be drank cold and en masse. So if you really want to bring out the flavors of your beer, above freezing would be great, and above when you're getting in your English styles and maybe some of your Belgian styles, maybe 15 to 17 degrees Celsius is probably pretty good. I have no idea what that is in America units, but
I call them freedom units because I like to take a friendly jab at all of our audiences. Yeah, freedom units.
I was going to ask, but now I'll
that's
just keep
like
it to myself.
105, right?
Yeah. I'm sure there's an app out there somewhere that will tell me, so I won't have to think. But
there's a bunch of math involved, and I hate math. So
I'm not good at maths. Okay, I got one more question here. This one's from Kruk. He says he wants to know. He's asking about gluten-free beer versus regular beer. I'm not really sure what he means there, but kind of like the pros and cons of each, maybe, or different flavors that you can expect.
Sure. So all beer, just in general, is made from barley, which has gluten in it. So absolutely, right off the bat, if you have problems with gluten, if you are celiac disease, do not drink beer without talking to the brewer or the company, because that can cause some problems. Gluten-free denotes certain things regarding the legalities of your state or province or whatever. So just figure that out before you drink it if you have a problem with gluten. But so gluten-free beers are generally made with sorghum, which is a gluten-free grain of sorts.
Interesting.
So it's weird because brewer's yeast is really good at fermenting gluten. So I've had a few that are very, very good and are exactly the same as a regular beer. Snowman Brewing in Toronto, I could not tell their gluten-free beer apart from a normal gluten-full beer. Glutenberg in Quebec, they make fantastic gluten-free beer, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm in the business of fermenting glutens.
You're all about the glutens.
Yeah, it's a gluten full like you're not going to ask somebody about gluten-free bread, right? Like it's
Yeah, it's like getting gluten-free scotch. It's like, well, I hate to tell you this, but the starting point is barley. So
yeah, it's full of gluten.
Glutens, this is not the product for you, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's not at all my area of expertise. And especially if you have an allergy to it, you should really talk to the people who are making it.
Fair enough.
But we don't do that.
Okay. No, that was just a question from our boy Crux. I wanted to make sure we got it in.
Sake is a great alternative if you're looking for a buzz. Sake does not have gluten.
Oh man, that's funny. John, you got any more audience questions there?
Yeah, no, there's a really good question here from Jared that really resonates with me because we talked in the past about sort of how sometimes it seems like cigar companies are sort of pushing the triple Ligero, quadruple Ligero, like, give me some more Ligero, and and it's almost like everyone just wants to go stronger, bigger, stronger, bigger. And Jared's question really is revolving around that, where it sort of seems to him that there's a lot of imperial stouts, there's double IPAs, a lot of people are experimenting with bourbon aging, and is this, in your opinion, Kevin, is this sort of a move away from sort of the subtler pales, blondes, reds, wheats, or do you think that's like just sort of how the market is diversified? Like what is your take on that?
There is always this yearly debate. Every year in the trade magazines, they say, this is the year of session beers. This is the year that 4% alcohol beers are going to kick ass, and everyone's going to realize all of a sudden, oh my God, look at all the flavor in this low-hopped, low IBU kind of nice beer. The new people who are coming into craft beer, the first thing you notice is hops. So they go, oh my God, this IPA is incredible. Right, because that's one of the first flavors you notice is the citrusy hop flavor, and traditionally IPAs are pretty strong. And I'm not taking a jab at anybody, but making a high alcohol beer is a highly hopped beer and a high alcohol beer is a lot easier than making a lower alcohol beer. To make something like Budweiser, or to make like Miller, or to make whatever Coors is extremely difficult. I would have a very hard time doing that in my brewery.
So far to sort of simultaneously repackage that statement and also maybe take a jab at the cigar industry, making Lanceros is very difficult because the blending is complex and takes a lot more skill, and making 7x60 cigars is easy because anybody can put 4 leaves of Ligero and 2 leaves of Seco and make the thing burn.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you get that all the time in cigars, right? Guys are chasing the big fat. Guys are chasing the big fat cigars, and I did the same thing when I started. I was like Robusto or bigger, big Churchills, whatever's the strongest. I wanted to knock me on my ass, and it took me a little while to realize, there's some nice mild cigars out there that are just really pleasant and a nice smoking experience. And it's the same beer that's 4% alcohol that'll provide you a nice drinking experience over the course of your pint.
So the alcohol level, the ABV as we call it, because do Americans go by ABV, Rob? Do they use?
No, we get
still proof for beers.
We get it's alcohol percentage by volume.
Yeah. Okay. So ABV.
Sure.
That's
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
But it just on mine it just says I always see the ALC/VOL. I don't see the whatever ABV or whatever it was you said APV.
ABV, alcohol by volume.
Okay, yeah. So it's the same thing. We just use a different acronym.
Okay. So Kevin, if I understand you right, there's absolutely no relationship between flavor complexity and alcohol level.
There is a bit of a relationship, but not if you do it right.
Okay.
Interesting. And so it's the same with cigars. I mean, with the extra Ligero, it's going to provide you with that extra strength, but strength can be a component of flavor too. So you can make something that's got, like you said, got a ton of Ligero in it, and it's going to knock you on your tuchus, and maybe it doesn't taste so good, but it doesn't sound like the person who's buying that really cares. And it could be the same thing with beers, I would imagine. When you get into this a craft type business, beer, wine, cigars, there's a lot of corollaries there, and I can really see, like, every year it seems like this is the year of the Lancero in the cigar world, even though it never really is, because
2014 is actually the year of Lancero.
And
so Marcoop coined it.
It never is. I mean, people are making Lanceros, yes, and maybe it's a year of the Lancero for us being the cigar nerds, but the average, I mean, you talk to anybody, talk to any shop owners, man, Lanceros don't move.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're in a shop some shops, they can't keep them in stock. And it's a regional thing or whatever. It's just a different view. And even for me, when I was first starting out smoking cigars, I didn't smoke a lot of Lanceros. It felt awkward to smoke something like it was just really long and really skinny, and I didn't worry so much about the flavor of it. It was just, it feels a little bit awkward especially if I'm sitting in the lounge with everybody's smoking these 6x60s, and I walk in. I don't want to be the guy walking in with a Lancero. But maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I can see where that would be an issue. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people have a hard time moving Lanceros, even if they're great.
I have a question, Kevin, because we talk all the time on our cigar chats to a lot of boutique manufacturers, and everyone wants to be boutique, whether they're boutique or not. Boutique is sort of the in thing. Everyone, I'm a boutique, he's a boutique. Even if you're selling $100 million worth of cigars, you want to be boutique because boutique is in. So it seems like there is a corollary, there's a tie-in with breweries where everyone wants to be an indie brewery, everyone wants to be that, quote-unquote craft brewery. And what exactly, for brewery standards, what does that even mean? Like, I don't even know what indie brewery means.
That's a pretty loaded question.
That's what we do here on. We ask the hard questions.
Hey, this is hard-hitting stuff, man.
There's the Brewers Association, who is a great lobbyist group for the craft brewers of North America. They have their set standards on what is a craft brewery, and it kind of keeps going up every year. Sam Adams is widely available across several countries, several continents, and they are still considered a craft brewery, and they are huge. And nobody would dispute that. No professional brewer would dispute that. They do great things. But there are some people who would say, well, they got TV ads, they got billboards, they're not a craft brewery. But at the same time, I feel craft means that you're thinking about your ingredients, you're making the best product you can, regardless of the amount of profit you can draw from that. If it was all about money, I would be making, a Pilsner with a whole bunch of corn in it, because we'd sell a shitload more of it than we would our 8% alcohol Imperial Stout,
So, I mean, and that's, I agree to a lot of that in terms of the tie into cigars. I mean, I think, and this could be completely off base, but it feels like what makes a boutique is your insistence upon focusing on the quality and not sort of selling out to, we're going to make a cigar, we're going to make and again, I don't mean to beat up on the big cigar range, but I'm going to do it. We're not going to make a 7x60, even though we know we'd sell a boatload of them, even though we know that that's what will load in the B&M. We're going to make a 6x48 or a 6x42 because that's what we believe to be the best flavored cigar, regardless of the economics of it.
Yeah, I would I would agree with that. John, are we just about out of time here?
That's our break. Yep.
Yeah, that's actually our final segment. Do you want me to just wrap it up?
Wrap it up.
You guys, Kevin, I appreciate you hanging out with us. And we'll hang back a little bit after this, but this wraps up our AFRN segment for today, guys. We appreciate you tuning in on the Armed Forces Radio Network. Thank you guys for everything that you do out there, keeping us safe. We appreciate it, so we can sit here and wax on about beer and cigars. So thank you for everything you guys do. Everybody stay safe, and we will be back with you next time. We appreciate it. Okay, and we're back. Now we're done with the AFRN segment. We can say fuck, shit, bitch, cock, balls. John, you get to go in and edit out when Kevin said shitload, because I'm not going to do it.
Sorry.
That's okay. You know what? We didn't even. Yeah, and it's funny because you said something about, you said ass at one point, and that's fine. We can say that. But then I thought, wow, I didn't really make the connection that this was an AFRN show, and I should probably tell you not to say shit, bitch, fuck, cock, balls, but you did pretty good.
Thank you.
You did pretty good, but you just dropped the one. But I'm going to, John, what you were just saying about different ring gauges and stuff, that's why I love, and it's topical because Kevin's smoking the 4 Kicks. One of the things I love about Crowned Heads is they don't care about, well, I shouldn't say that because that doesn't sound right. They make the cigars the way that in the sizes and the vitolas that best represent the flavors that they're trying to achieve with each blend.
I think what you're looking for, and John Huber's going to probably rip me a new one, but he doesn't compromise.
Exactly.
He doesn't compromise.
Sure.
He doesn't.
That is what defines craft right there, is not compromising. Like everyone's like, oh, Headley Grange drumstick, that's the best. I like their other vitolas as well. Every one of their cigars has this like cool, like citrusy kind of fruity note to them. Do not compromise. Keep doing that. John, if you ever watch this, send me a bunch of free shit because I love your cigars and they don't sell them in Canada. That'd be awesome.
You can actually you can get them from the Cigar Federation store.
There you go.
And they actually have.
They will appear to your mailbox magically. We can't speak to how that happens, but
I'm not sure what their shipping process is, but you can buy them there.
You can buy them there.
Anywho, but I've also noticed that Drew Estate does a pretty good job of that too. I mean, yeah, they make the Flying Pigs that are a 60, but it's just more of and the pigs in general. I mean, with the Norteño and with the Herrera Esteli, I don't think the Herrera Esteli came out in the 60, did it? I don't think it did.
No way. And Willie came out with all. I mean, it was all small ring gauge stuff.
Yeah, it's that classic Cuban style, exactly.
Classic Cuban style, absolutely.
And they don't. I mean, they don't bend. They don't bend over to make a buck, if that makes sense. Although they've positioned themselves and they've worked hard and they've been successful, so they can afford to do that. But I can understand why some of the smaller companies and the newer companies are going to be quick to make a 6x60 or a 7x70 or whatever, because that's what sells. Yeah, it's trying to make a little bit of money.
Yeah, it's easy for us to wax poetic about what we like, but ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. Whether we like it or not, it's a business, and if you want to pay your employees and have the electricity on, and the CEO actually wants to write himself a check, because a lot of the I'm sure this is true in the breweries, but I know for cigar companies, these guys who start out companies, they don't take checks. I mean, these guys do it for the love of it, and it takes them years before they're actually taking any money home. I mean, these guys aren't driving Lambos,
Sure. In the beer world, your 6x60, your whatever, that's your IPA, right? That's your moneymaker. That you make an IPA even though you hate IPAs because people will buy them.
That's a good analogy.
You just put IPA on a label and people will absolutely buy them.
So I know we kind of got off topic talking about ring gauges, and I blame John. I blame John completely. But
Sorry for that.
one thing I want to get back to, and I'm going to keep calling this the Aphrodite because that's just what I'm going to stick with.
I feel as a Canadian, I really have to stand up, especially as a Western Canadian who tends to, crap on our Eastern Canadian brethren. I really have to stand up for our French Canadians and say it's Aphrodite. We respect the French Canadian listeners out there. There's probably only one, but whoever you are, we appreciate you listening to our show.
Well, I'll put it into context. 262 Cigars makes a cigar called the Revere, named after Paul Revere. And I'm an American. I know who Paul Revere is. And we had Clint on the show, and for the first 30 minutes of the show, I was calling it the Revere.
Ouch.
So the fact that I'm pronouncing
Wow.
Aphrodite wrong really isn't as bad as that. But anywho, I'm going to follow that up with a huge compliment because this beer is fucking fantastic.
I think me and John are going to do the rest of the podcast in French, if that's all right.
Yeah, by all means. But, tell me how to say fucking fantastic in French because.
No, we're going to conjugate tabernacle because the thing is, no one out there is going to understand it. French listeners are going to understand it. They're going to laugh. I don't think we've got any troops in Afghanistan listening, so.
No, we've actually there are still people watching and listening to the show though. So.
Sure.
But anyway, this beer it's a stout brewed with real cocoa and vanilla bean. It's probably one of the sweetest beers I've ever tasted, and the pairing with this is fantastic. I would love to pair this with a Padron 64 Anniversary Maduro. It would be amazing. This is when the first sip I took, it was one of those wow. It's a wow beer. It's not something I'd want to drink all the time because it's pretty heavy. It's not that much alcohol in it, 6.5%. But yeah, this is damn good.
That would be one of those great that would be one of those great compliment kind of things with the Padron 64.
Very
right?
complimentary, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Build each other up,
Exactly. Yeah, and that's we actually had a conversation about this. Man Angel wants to know what I'm drinking. Everybody wants to know what this beer is. This one it's Aphrodite, and it's funny, if you guys go back and watch the beginning of the show, John has a bunch of beers from California, and I went, and this is a Canadian beer. I had no idea. And actually, this McKellar, this one here, the breakfast oatmeal stout brewed with coffee, this is a Norwegian beer. I had no idea. And my last name is Rasmussen. My grandfather was born in Norway. See, I kept it all in the family. And then in the California. See how I did that?
It's almost like you planned it. It's
almost like I did, but I had absolutely no idea.
No idea.
So guys, this one is it's Aphrodite. It's chocolate stout brewed with vanilla bean. I got it at the local shop. I bought it. You can buy it one bottle at a time. Is how they sold it to me. It wasn't horribly expensive, but then the McKellar Beer Geek breakfast stout brewed with coffee. This one was pretty bitter, but it's an I thought it would be an interesting pairing given the coffee aspect of it. And then the first one that I did was the Monk's Blood from 21st Amendment here in California. Belgian-style dark ale brewed with a bunch of different things, cinnamon, vanilla, dried figs. Yeah, this Aphrodite is... and she's kind of hot, too, on the label. So, yeah, this is good stuff.
That's Dieu de Ciel from Montreal.
This is a person?
They have a brew pub.
Oh, no, that's the name.
Dieu de Ciel is the brewery.
Okay.
I mean, they do have very hot women in Montreal, just to throw it out there.
She's good looking.
Yeah.
I've actually, since I bought this, I was invited. See, Canadians are so nice. I bought the beer, and I just got an invitation to come check out their brew pubs. But I'm sure everybody's invited to come check them out. But
sure.
Yeah, there's one, looks like they're in Montreal, and oh boy. I'll just go, it's in Quebec. I'll just go with that. But yeah, if you guys see that, check it out. It is, again, not a beer I would want to drink all the time, but damn good.
I'm going to have to say that my favorite pairing, sadly, or whatever you want to take it as, the Bad Air Double IPA with the Nica Rustica. They're battling flavor profiles, but they do so in a very interesting way. I wasn't expecting this. It's bringing out interesting flavors in the cigar. It's bringing interesting flavors out in the beer. The flavor profile that I thought was going to be really excellent was the stout, which on its own, highly recommend this Green Flash. Thanks for the recommendation, Kevin. This double stout is amazing. I would probably pair this double stout with something a little bit more peppery. I think that would go a little bit better than this medium cigar. The India Pale Ale is good, although definitely gets washed out by the flavors here.
So, Kevin, did you get into that chocolate stout?
I did. Now the Young's chocolate stout, this one right here. That's a very nice beer.
So very nice.
Personally, I think with the 4 Kicks, I prefer the Chimay Blue.
Okay.
Just the effervescence, as we were talking about, the bubbles kind of lifts the palate. It has this odd citrusy taste to it. It has this fruitiness that really complements the Chimay Blue, and it's like dark fruit, this fig, this raisin kind of flavor that you get from the beer, versus the chocolate, which is a little bit overpowering. That's not one that I've been reaching for out of the 4 beers in front of me. I have finished the Chimay. I haven't finished anything else.
Oh, there you go. With that chocolate stout, I don't know if you've smoked well, I don't think it's actually hit the market yet. The Jericho Hill, the new release from Crown Heads. If you get your hands on that, pair that with the chocolate stout. I think those two will be very good.
I think Kevin's probably going to set up a side trade with me a couple weeks down the road when I bring back my box of Jericho Hill from the Cigar Federation store. Because they're, I don't even remember what we rated that, but that was a pretty big hit with everybody.
It got a 91 in the group rating. I gave it a 93. It seems like I've scored like 3 cigars since we got back, and I gave them all 93s. No, actually no, I didn't. I gave the one from La Zona was an 89, I think, or an 88, or an 87 even. That was the Crown Heads. I mean, that to me, it had like that chocolate souffle type profile. Where it wasn't too sweet, and the flavors were really dry. It didn't have that heavy mouthfeel. And I'm stealing all that from John because that was the way he described it after I said chocolate souffle. But,
I don't think people talk enough because Kevin's mentioned it several times with the effervescence of the Chimay, and I don't think people talk enough about the mouthfeel because mouthfeel is sort of this interesting Japanese concept of how the texture and flavor combine together for a different level of experience. And for me, the Jericho Hill, to coin Rob's phrase of calling it creamy, when you talk about creaminess is not just the sweetness, it's a very thick coating in the mouthfeel. And for me, the Jericho Hill was this sort of very thick chocolate without being sweet, but it had a big thickness to it, a heaviness to it. And that's a particular type of flavor and taste. And Kevin, I'm sure you can speak to this in beer. I'm sure there's like effervescence is very light, and there's. What would you say in the beer world is a heavier flavor?
Sure. There's ways to manipulate that in a beer. You can manipulate the level of residual sugar, which will add more of a mouthfeel. You can add certain things like wheat or rye, which will add things called beta-glucans, which will give this like silkiness. Oats, like an oatmeal stout, will give that silkiness. And then you can carbonate it, and carbonation makes what's called carbonic acid, which kind of lifts, adds this bitterness and lifts things off your tongue, which is why like you have this light thing like a saison versus something dark like a stout, which are opposite levels of carbonation. One's highly carbonated, one's low carbonation, and that changes how you perceive that beer. So, like something like Guinness has very low carbonation, so it's not very bitter, even though people always say it's so heavy, but it's not. It's 4.2% alcohol. It's very easy drinking beer.
I love Guinness.
Yeah, I love Guinness too.
I also love Guinness.
I was lucky enough to spend some time in Ireland, and my father-in-law owns some land in Ireland on like the upper west coast, not Northern Ireland, but County Mayo. If you're familiar with Ireland, I don't know if you know where that is, but very rural area. It's all farms and stuff like that. And the city, Ballinglen, that we're closest to, is one street, and it's just one main lane that's got, and there's four different four different pubs. And I drank my way through all of them, and that Guinness, man. And it ruined me for Guinness a little bit, because Guinness over there, and I'm sure a lot of it is placebo, but just tasted so much better.
It absolutely tastes better. I mean, and we're getting over time here, but I mean, Scotch distilleries talk about altitude and location and water, and I'm sure the same is true of breweries, that you talk about your source water, that's going to have a huge impact in what you're tasting. I mean, the minerality content. I mean, I had the same experience when I went over to Scotland. I got actual Irish Guinness, and it was a completely different experience than what I have over here, shipped across on boats and carbonated or nitrogen infused cans. I mean, it's good. I love Guinness. And incidentally, this segment is brought to you by Guinness, apparently. Please sponsor us and send us lots of free packs of Guinness, because we love your product. But yeah, absolutely.
I was surprised that it's only it's like 120 calories for a can. You'd think it would be more, because I think it's pretty standard for a beer, isn't it, for calorie size? Or is that really high?
No, yeah. Most of the calories from a beer come from the alcohol content, so lower alcohol, 4.2%.
Oh, really?
Guinness. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We should do this. I know, like John said, we're going over time. We should do this again. This show was fun. Not that the other shows weren't.
It's a very complex topic, beer, and I hope I skimmed the topic very well. But we should definitely do this again.
No, you did a great job, man.
I'm going to throw it out there right now, because Kevin, being a fellow Canadian, I'm going to hook him up with some Jericho Hills when I come back with them. And I think we're going to have a revisiting session, and we're going to do a Jericho Hill pairing. So maybe John Huber can hook us up in some way. But we're going to do a Jericho Hill pairing. We're each going to sort of do a blind beer pairing with the Jericho Hill, and maybe talk about that experience. How does that sound to you, Kevin?
It sounds good. With a little more planning, I hope I can send you guys out some samples of my own beer, which would be great.
Yeah. No, I think this is one of our highest attended shows, I would think, from what I can see from the numbers here. So this is a topic that people are interested in. So,
awesome.
Man Angel says he loves the craft beer topic, and bring it back. Bring it back. Said it twice. Third time. Bring it back again. And a fourth. He's just copying and pasting at this point. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Kevin, you gave us a lot of insight into beer. I don't think we gave you any insight into cigars, but if we did, it was purely an accident. But no, this was great. I enjoyed this a lot. Thank you for spending some time.
Cool. Thanks for having me. If anyone wants to get at me, it's KFBass, KFBASS on Twitter or on Reddit, and I'll answer any questions you want.
Oh, let's see.
Even the weird ones.
Well, the weird ones are the funny ones. Those are fun.
And a shout out to Wellington Brewery. If you have a local store, look for Wellington Brewery. As a Canadian, obviously, I'm proud of my country. I know that we make great beer here. So if you see some Wellington on the shelf, please pick it up, try it out. Thanks for everyone for watching. Appreciate the Fed heads. Appreciate your support. As the cigar chat here is going crazy, next week, I think Rob is working because he's got a side gig. So we're going to have another co-host. I'm kind of switching it around a little bit. Catfish is going to sit in with us. We're going to talk about coffee. We may or may not have a special guest. That's to be determined. We're going to talk all about coffee. You guys can hear me go on and on and on for hours and hours about coffee, which is one of my passions. Coffee is an interesting beverage. We're going to do a lot of interesting pairing next week. We'll probably post in advance some of the beans and the particular cigar we're looking to pair. So that's next week on the 13th at a regular time, which is 5. I'm going to have to go through this because some people's Logan seem unable to figure out how time zones work. So it's 5 p.m. Eastern, or sorry, 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's our regular time. Your regular host, Cigar Surgeon. Rob's going to be off next week. We're going to have Catfish as our co-host. Rob will be returning in the week afterwards. I don't know what that show is going to be about. We'll figure it out. Thanks very much for turning in.
But wait, before you sign off, can I ask one question? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but this just popped up in the chat. Folks want to know if does Wellington Brewery, can they find any of the Wellington beers in America?
That is a work in progress. America has some weird laws. Every state is like its own country.
So maybe soon.
Maybe soon. Yeah,
okay.
that's
coming
not
soon.
Okay, well there you go, and you guys can check them out. It's at wellingtonbrewery.ca, so you can get all the information there.
Curious.
Okay.
Thanks very much, guys. See you next week.